Feudal Alloy is a Metroidvania where you control a fish who is controlling a robot? Yeah, that sounds right. In Feudal Alloy, you will be wandering around various regions, dueling to the death, and seeking out very important processing chips that expand your aquatic robotic abilities. The game's structure might use a by-the-books Metroidvania formula, but that doesn't mean it's without its own unique concepts. One of the most important features here is management of your temperature gauge, which limits how much you can attack and dodge, adding a huge penalty to players who go in mindlessly hacking and slashing. The combat requires dipping and weaving in and out of battle because once that heat gauge reaches red, your ability to attack and dodge are completely stripped away from you until you cool down. Some sections of the map itself also play into this feature by purposely overheating you and forcing consumption of precious cooling potions just to be able to progress through them. The expanded powers you gain along the way also function off this heating system, but luckily, jumping is not tied to this gauge, giving you some room for error when mismanaging this delicate balance. This overall heat mechanic is similar to a slightly more in-depth stamina system. Character progression in Feudal Alloy functions off a decently rewarding but straightforward skill tree, replaceable parts for your robot, and the processing chips I referenced before that add new abilities over the course of the game. The progression here for your hero is well balanced and each incremental improvement felt satisfying, but sadly the same cannot be said for the overall game's progression. Many regions here require finding maps before you have any idea of where you're going, which is fine. It has colored key cards that open certain doors, which is fine. And it has certain areas only accessible with gained abilities, which is also fine. When combined all together, however, with a poorly designed map interface that doesn't quite show enough information, Feudal Alloy, even for a Metroidvania, has an incredibly high amount of wandering around aimlessly on where to go next. Instead of feeling inspired by newfound ways to access different areas, it often felt like more of a burden when gaining new abilities or these keycards. Now, being lost in a Metroidvania is a core principle of the genre, but there is a delicate balance when designing the map, and Feudal Alloy somewhat misses the mark in this regard. Other issues start to also become more apparent the longer you backtrack these regions, such as many reused enemy types. There is also an awkward amount of these gauntlet-style rooms where you fight waves of enemies. Combine this with a low amount of proper bosses, and it makes these rooms start to feel more and more like placeholders of where a boss should have been. In the end, Feudal Alloy is a somewhat lopsided Metroidvania. When it's firing on all cylinders and you're solving puzzles, avoiding traps, and managing your heat gauge effectively during combat, it presents a solid foundation for an enjoyable adventure. As soon as you start to lose that groove, however, and get lost on the way back to getting more lost, the game screeches to a halt as the world's tedium starts to show as you increasingly backtrack these regions. Feudal Alloy is asking a fair price for what it offers, and it does have moments of enjoyment quite regularly, but doesn't necessarily do enough new to warrant resounding praise. If you enjoyed this style of review, consider subscribing, and for as little as $1, supporting this channel via Patreon grants you access to regular game giveaways, the Boomstick Gaming Discord channel, and behind-the-scenes updates on future videos in production. This not only helps with the day-to-day upkeep of my channel, but also allows me to provide more back to you. This has been Deadite, and thanks for watching Boomstick Gaming.